Go back to our board tile. So board tile is a special custom type. So JavaScript disappears at runtime, but TypeScript helps us while we are coding. So if you can see here, our tiles, this corresponds to a letter, and this has a point. Is this pending or just preview button? You can see here. Custom types are ability or feature of TypeScript. So at first, I thought board tile is just an ordinary variable. Board tile from library game data. So we can see here, this is the interface. So this is an object which must have this type, or I mean this contains the object that board tile must receive across all the project must have all this type of attributes. If you are seeing question mark then colon, meaning this is not always required. It can have this type inside the object, but sometimes you can allow it not to have this. So as I said, board tile is not a variable, not just a variable. It is not a function either. A custom type is, imagine like in a real Scrabble tile. This has a letter, this has a point, number 2, for example letter D, and this corresponds to a position. So instead of writing these properties over and over again, we the developers gave this shape, gave this a name, gave this an own identity. So it's like giving a blueprint, and its name is board tile. So whenever I see board tile in the near future, I already know what kind of data React must expect. So an interface defines a contract. So think of interface, this is like a character sheet in a video game, wherein a character has a name, has an HP, has an attack value, and a defense value. So our board tile has the same ability. It is an object with which stores letters, points, and these boolean abilities like pending and preview. So simply an interface simply is a checklist or a list of what information something should have. In this case, this is a list of all the information for a variable to be considered a board tile. It must have letters, it must have points, but it can also have an optional pending or preview boolean. That explains why without this, I could accidentally create a file that doesn't have a letter. If this is such the case, TypeScript would complain like wrong spelling or spell check. No, we cannot accidentally create a file that doesn't have a letter. We can create a tile that doesn't have a letter. So TypeScript will catch the error for us. So what is this object entries? Object entry. So object entries. At first, this confused me. Suppose that this board. So in the position of, for example, this, we are placing a tile like this, right? We are placing these tiles in different kinds of location. This is not just simply an array. This is an object. But how do we loop through an object? The answers is object entries. So from an object itself, the object entries is the ability to cycle through the object so that we can know how the board places all of this. Then, after object entries happen or proceeds to execute, then we can proceed to use our favorite map function. This now becomes an array. So React developers loves arrays because we can use things like map, filter, or for each. That is different if it is an object. So we need to use object entry first so that we can process an object into a array. So going back to our spread operator. So simply spread operator is like this. Imagine that we have a player. We can call this Sean. And of course, this should be a name, right? What if the time comes that we need to update this? So our object is gonna copy the player object and update this to have a score. For example, we need to have a score of 300, 204. So the old object is our player. So this contains a name attribute. So this spread operator lets you copy everything that this player object has and add an attribute of score here and turn this into a new object. So this would be the result. For example, name Sean. Basically, that's the gist. So if we're gonna connect it to React, why not just change the old object? Why create more and more variables or objects? Because React prefers creating new objects rather than changing the old objects. So it's like an old board, this. We're gonna copy this old board and apply the new changes. So meaning if the present board, old board is this, has an E. If I remove this, what is happening behind the scenes in the React DOM is it copies the previous version of the previous board. It's like it screenshots the previous board and stores it. Then what changes, what was removed, React screenshots everything and assigns it to a new board. Then React notices the difference, so then the screen updates. That's why you see a spread operator board. So why not just edit the board? This seems like easy, right? Like you move a board and you have a tile and done. But React works differently. So instead of the current board, copy the board, put the tile, replace the old board, then React re-renders. React doesn't like us changing the original data directly. I repeat, React doesn't like us changing the original data directly. So just putting things into recap, we have learned so much, like the use memo, interfaces, and spread operators, and so much more. But instead of defining those things, we tell a story in our project so that we understand more. As we understand the new React and TypeScript features we are being introduced, we find new things to learn. If we find it strange or new to us, we are investigating it and then we understand it little by little. That's it for our game board. So many things are happening inside this, but at least we understand it more today. Thank you so much. Lastly, that's what makes my series different. I'm not pretending that I already know everything, but I invite you, everyone in our audience, to discover this with you. This is far more engaging to us beginners because you're learning the process of understanding of unfamiliar code base, not just memorizing terminologies. Thank you so much. As we see each other again, goodbye.